Hi, my name is Laura Jacobs. By day, I'm a psychotherapist specializing in transgender and gender non-binary issues, in LGBTQIA issues, and in gender and sexual diversity more broadly, including BDSM, non-monogamy, and sex workers. By night, I'm an author, I'm an activist, I'm a public speaker, and I have other intersecting identities as well. I'm white, I'm middle class, I'm queer, I'm kinky, I'm the grandchild of Holocaust survivors, and I also identify as Oreophilic. Those of you who don't get the joke can email me later. The earliest known references we have to people questioning the immutability of gender actually go back to ancient Sumeria. This is over 4,000 years ago, and it's really quite historically fascinating. But it's also irrelevant, because we are here today, and we do not need to prove a legacy in order to demand respect. Gender is a fundamental aspect of the human experience, and one through which we can investigate relationships, power, the body, society, history, sexuality, and even existential questions of meaning. Transgender and gender non-binary people are blessed with the opportunity to do this a little bit more consciously than most. Common belief is that there are two distinct genders, and that if you unscrew the top of somebody's head, you'll see a brain that's pink or blue. I can never remember if you unscrew clockwise or counterclockwise, but the prevailing theory is that in transgender people, an error occurred, creating a brain and body mismatch that can only be rectified through hormones and surgeries. Now, this has enabled countless people to live lives that are happier and more authentic, and that's pretty wonderful. But others, due to stigma or poverty or racism or just an unwelcoming healthcare system, haven't been so fortunate. But brains are gray, and the science behind the gender binary is ambiguous. To me, this narrative of born in the wrong body, it's a narrative of brokenness and victimization which characterizes us as subject to some greater force, whether genetics or a deity against which we're powerless. It means we are damaged and in need of repair, and it polices heteronormativity, and I simply cannot accept this about myself. I also can't accept that this is the only narrative that society seems to find acceptable, or that outsiders have decided they have the authority to define our identities in ways that put their comfort ahead of our own. Now, I identify as trans and genderqueer, and to me that means I like to play with gender, I like to problematize gender, I like to confront gender norms in how I present and how I move through the world. I feel female and male, I feel both and neither one, and so many of the labels that we use in this area feel equally authentic and inauthentic, and I simply can't tell when one gender ends and another begins. Now, when I began my own transition, this was again about 4,000 years ago, it seemed like there were two distinct options, and I was deciding which one I wanted to pursue. I rejected that one or the other was somehow inherently better. I could see that being male or female might be privileged in a certain context, but that didn't equate to better. I realized that gender can only be understood through the lens of culture, and so can't be tied to any particular expression, and even the idea that certain procreative roles were inherent to gender seemed a bit shaky. So I reframed the question, and instead I asked, what's the purpose of gender? Now, the Dalai Lama has said that life is about the pursuit of happiness. And there's a Hindu mystic who wrote that all religions, once you get past the initial dogma, are simply different paths to the same point of enlightenment. He said that most people pursue the religion into which they were born, but that if a different faith better facilitated a person's connection to the divine, then change was not only acceptable, but it was desirable. This left me with happiness and enlightenment, and I wondered if the same was true for gender. From there, my transition became less a headlong rush toward a predetermined goal of passing for a cisgender woman, and instead a curiosity about gender as a lived experience. I decided that the search for a cause or a biological marker was irrelevant and probably even a bit misguided. The source of my feelings seemed far less important than the decisions I wanted to make on how to act on them. And so from there, it just became endless individual steps. I combined genders, I crafted genders, I considered how each one might aid or inhibit my personal growth. I even grieved my losses as I made decisions on how to proceed. And in that way, I arrived at the nuanced gender I live today. I was also questioning the impact of technology on gender. Medical interventions allow some of us to change our primary and secondary sex characteristics. We have phalloplasty that creates a penis and a scrotum and testicles. We have vaginoplasty that creates a vagina and a vulva. We have chest masculinization and breast augmentation, all of which create bodies that are readable to outsiders, but it's clear that cisgender bodies are still the reference point. But will technology give us options that are artistic and creative? Artificial limbs even now can transmit rudimentary sensory data back to the wearer. And it seems to me that a fully functional, artificial, sensate penis is maybe not that far off. But do we have to stick to penis and vagina norms? Can we have genitalia that look like flowers or abstract sculpture? Can we have multiple? Can they be interchangeable? And what about other areas of the body? Now, communication is another form of technology that shapes our identities through access to the internet and media. And we may soon have technologies that allow us to engage even more immersively. Now, there are many different visions of what a transhumanist future might look like. Some are very Eurocentric and Western and sort of proceed from a notion of a disembodied brain in a vat. And think the Matrix, only, well, hopefully less malevolent depending on who's in charge, I suppose. And others are more feminist and intersectional and center collectivity and even ecology. But assuming technology continues to impact the body and identity, we may have access to gendered existences that we cannot now even fathom. What I have learned is that the social norms we've been trained to follow are artificial, and that gender is neither binary nor a spectrum, but a multidimensional, amorphous construct that's difficult to describe even by metaphor. Gender is about joy and wisdom and happiness and personal growth and enlightenment, and we can embody our genders in empowered acts of self-creation. The trans community is increasingly determined to make sure that everyone has access to the full multiplicity of genders and that all are valid and valued. I believe that gender can be a choice and that gender, like so much of the human experience, is infinite.